Now, we all know that braid has much less stretch in it than mono. And I woke up this morning with a burning desire to know how much more stretch is there in mono than braid. Not how everyone weighs up, I know. So that's exactly what I'm going to do this morning. Test out mono against braid. So armed with some mono and some braid, there's one more thing I need. A 10 kilogram dumbbell when I was about 16, trying to get ripped for the extent of about a week. And lastly, a venue to carry out this test. Where better than a local football pitch? Now, this may not be the most scientific way of doing it because I'm using a dumbbell in a field on a rather undulated football pitch, but it should give you an idea of the different distances and how the lines react over those different distances, starting from the goalie line to the box, to the halfway line, to the other goal. See what happens. Now, of course, if I was to use loads of different lines from loads of different manufacturers from across the industry, I'd get loads of different results. So I'm going to keep this as simple and fair as possible by using one braid and one monofilament from the same company. The braid I'm using today is 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗿, which is a fast sinking braid, and obviously the nature of braid is its strength to diameter property, so it casts well, sinks really well, and the abrasion resistance is there as well, which is the benefits of using braid. But a lot of places don't let you use braid, so you have to go down a monofilament. And this is their 𝗲𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗔 16 pound 0.30 breaking strain. Again, great for casting, high abrasion resistance and fast sinking. So it's the closest replica I could get in a monofilament to a braid from pole position. Of course, the results will vary if this was a lighter breaking strain or a stronger breaking strain, but I think 16 pound is pretty much down the middle of what most people will use. So let's get to the test. Now, the test is pretty simple. I've got my weight of the 10 kilo dumbbell, which is actually in the goalkeeper's line, where there's a bit of a dip, which is obviously where the goalkeeper stands a lot. So it needs a bit of resistance to pull this out of that divot, so it's not going to roll too easily. And I take a walk back to the 6-yard line, then the 18-yard line, then the halfway line, and then all the way over to the goalie's line on the other side. Now, those distances are 6 yards for the goalie's first line, 18 yards for the outside of the box. Halfway line is usually around 50 to 60 yards because a full length pitch is between 100 and 130 yards. So of course, then the last test will be at the other goalkeeper's line, which will be between 100 and 130 yards. So I may not have the measurements exact, but they will be exactly the same for each of the lines. So starting off with, we'll use the braid, which is set up on the middle of that dumbbell. I'm going to walk back to the 6-yard line and see how much stretch there is to move this dumbbell out of that line. Here we are on the 6-yard line. The line is tight. I don't think I'm going to have to move much to move that dumbbell. There we go. What's that? 8 inches to move that dumbbell. Just put it back on the line and do the same test with the mono. Mono is now attached. Let's start rolling it out. There we have the same test once again with the mono. See if we can pull it out. And there we go, it's rolled. So already that's gone from, I'd say, what was 8 inches with the braid to a good 4 or 5 foot, even at 6 yards. Quite a big difference, even at such close range. Onto the 18-yard line. And there we go, to the 18-yard line. It's time to start pulling. And again, it's already moved out. A foot, not much at all. Onto the mono. And there we go, 18 yards with the mono. Let's start moving. I may actually go out of frame at this rate. And hope the line doesn't snap. There's quite a bit of tension on that now. And still good, there we go, it's rolled. So I've moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 feet at the 18-yard line. So I know I've just mixed my measurements there, but 7 foot to foot, size 11 shoes difference. This is really unscientific, isn't it? But that shows already quite a big difference. Now a big jump, we're going to move on to the halfway line. Now, before we carry on with the test, just a quick mention of some of the other main lines available in the range from pole position. Now, the one that I'm using today is the 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗿, but there is also a 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗵𝗿. Now, the difference between the two, there's a couple of differences. First of all, the color, without dropping the line. The 𝗲𝗵𝗷 is much more of a dark browny silty sort of colour, whereas the 𝗃𝗵𝗷, as you'd imagine, is more of a camo pattern, quite subtle greens, subtle browns and blacks in there. So it's much more suited for weedier waters, and this one also is much slower sinking, so it's ideal for having the line that settles on the top of the weed rather than being too heavy and dense that it sinks too fast, beds into the weed and makes it a bit more troublesome than maybe the heavy one was. So this is more suited to venues where you want to get the line down low, out of the way, still casts really well, but just sinks a bit quicker than the 𝗃𝗵𝗷. So those are the two braids. We've then got a fluoro-sink. The name is pretty obvious as to what this is. There's 100% fluorocarbon, and one of its main attributes is that this disappears completely in water, or next to them completely in water. It's really good for cagey fish or clear waters where you want to make your line completely disappear, but it also sinks really well, so it sits to the bottom of the lake bed and disappears and blends in with its surroundings, as well as being really easy to cast as well and easy to work with. Then you've got fluoro-silk. Now this is a fluorocarbon hybrid, so it's not out and out fluorocarbon, it's not out and out monofilament, it's a bit of a mixture, so similar to the fluoro-silk but not 100% fluorocarbon. Casts really well, sinks really well, abrasion resistance is there as well, so it's something for those of you that don't want to go fully fluoro but don't want to go fully mono. It's something that's a bit of a hybrid there for you. And then you've got the HyperSense. Now this is the one I'm using for today's test. This is your more straight down the middle type of monofilament. The coloration of it is quite understated and muted, sort of dark browny blacks. I'm not really sure of the exact color. In certain tinges it almost looks like there's a hint of a purple hue to some of the line, but obviously in its individual strands, that little subtle differences between all the colorations means that it breaks down quite nicely underwater, sinks well, casts well, and of course at 16 pound 0.30, this is probably your perfect go-to line if you're a monofilament user. There is also one more line in the range that I don't have with me today because that's now taken position in my main fishing bag, and that is their 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗄 line, which is a dedicated out and out floater fishing line, or your zig line, whatever you want to use it, some sort of line that doesn't sink, it floats, that's the one you want to go for. So for more information on any of these lines and all the others of their snag leaders and shock leaders and things, head over to the 𝗃𝗺𝗺𝗺 website, check them out for yourself. Okay, so we're at the halfway line, about 50-60 yards, and as you can see, I've positioned the camera a lot further away from me now because I'm expecting that mono to be quite a few paces more than the braid. But we are up tension with the braid, time to start pulling it, and it's moved. Next to no difference again, so the very start one, which was probably 8 inches, that's probably just over a foot now of having to move that distance. So as you can see, braid is doing exactly what you'd expect braid to do, as being far less stretchy, far less force needed to move that weight at the other end. Now, before we carry on with the test, remember this is dry weight, I think it might be called, because it's different to how a fish would react in the water. This is 10 kilos on land of weight being dragged with no kind of buoyancy aids. Of course, it's going to act a bit differently in water, but the test is the same for both. Time to get the mono. Now, the way I'm paying the line out of each spool is exactly the same as well. The tension of it on my fingers to keep the line taut up to that weight. And there we are, halfway line with the mono. Hopefully I'll stay in frame. That's a lot of pressure. There we go. So I am 4 foot from the center circle line. Let's do that in paces because the other one was only a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. About 23 feet or size 11 boots from here to where the weight finally moved compared to what was a foot with the braid. I know this is probably the results you expected, but seeing the difference over these distances is quite impressive to see. So let's jump all the way to the other goal line. And here we go. Double the distance of the last test, which was on the halfway line. We are now goal line to goal line, which is anywhere between 100 to 130 yards. I would say, being a local little park field, this is probably close to the 100-yard mark. Still a good old distance for the test. Now, I'm expecting this to be 2 paces tops until it moves, and I've angled the camera that way because I'm pretty sure with the mono, I may be walking through that little gap into the next field. Let's give it a test. So, start pulling with a braid. And there it goes. So, about here it finally moved, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paces with the braid. which is next to nothing when you think that's over 100 yards. So let's go get the mono and see how far I've got to walk with that to move the dumbbell. Well, you can certainly tell I only play 5-a-side on a small Astro pitch. Just walking up and down a full length pitch, doing me in. But there we go, full length with the mono. How far do I need to walk until that budges? I can feel the stretch. That's ridiculous. Still going. Actually, I'm going into the next field. We're into the next field. And there we go. I've just felt it roll. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4 over the roots, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, let's put that down, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42 paces, 42 feet, whatever you want to call it, from where I started to where I finally shifted that weight. That's quite a big amount. And of course, if you're fishing even greater distances than that, if you're fishing 150, 200 yards, double if not more of that. But one of the things I have found, which is quite interesting, is that when it finally budges with the mono, because there's so much stretch in it and it finally shifts it, it rolls that dumbbell. I can see that dumbbell's rolled quite a long way in the other box. So that's the only difference I've found. Yes, this budges it quicker, but there's not much gear, there's no spring. The mono, once it finally goes, pulls that weight a lot further because there's a lot of built up tension in that line. When it wants to finally free that weight, it wants to come back to where it normally was and pull it a bit more. Interesting. Results I pretty much expected, but that amount is pretty impressive. And here's what I'm talking about. I've just got back to the dumbbell after the last test with the mono. As you can see, it's rolled a good few yards past the 6-yard line from where it started here, whereas every time I pulled with the braid, it didn't get anywhere near as far as that. So quite a difference. So let's put some of those results into more of a fishing situation, because what I've just shown you there is a massively hyped up exaggeration of the differences between mono and braid, because of course you're not going to be dragging a 10-kilo carp across a football field from the other side of the football field, I would hope. When you're fishing, the fish are in water, they're not as heavy as they are on land, and of course that means you're not dragging a dead weight from a standstill position. Everything's moving, so you're not going to see as dramatic a difference in water as you've just seen in that test. Got to make that clear. But of course there's no denying that braid does still offer much less stretch and more feel when you're playing a fish. So where you'd want to be using a braid like the 𝗲𝗷𝗵𝗿 or the 𝗃𝗏𝗏 would be at distance, range work, boat work, something where you really need to have as much control over the carp at massive distances, because of course if you're using a mono at a greater distance, there's going to be a lot more stretch and you're not going to have as much control over that carp. So that's one situation where you'd really want to go down a braid route. Another would be if you're fishing tight against snags, or the ground you're actually fishing over, the lake bed, is heavy, snaggy, loads of rocks and things, and you need to be able to, one, power the fish out of those situations a bit easier, but also have a line that's much stronger and up to the task of that sort of fishing. So that's where you would use braids. So there's a lot of pros to using braid, but of course, as you know, a lot of fisheries don't allow braided main lines. So you have to use monos, fluoros and things like that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. It's then a case of choosing the right one for you, whether it's in relation to the diameter, the strength. So the ones that I've been using in this test was 60 pound. I'd say that's pretty much your run of the mill, what most people will be going for. And it will work in most situations. Even at range, it will still work. You just might have less indication maybe and things like that, and less control over the carp. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with monos. That's all I've ever used. I've never used braided main lines for any of my carp fishing and never had an issue. So that's when you choose one of these, like the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, the fluoro silk, one of these, depending on the sort of lake you're fishing. The fluorocarbon ones is ones that's slightly clearer lake bed or clearer water, and the other ones are ones where you're not too fussed about having your line disappear. So those are the options from Pole Position. Great lines, and I hope you enjoyed watching this little test, and hopefully you pick up some of these yourself. That's everything from me for now. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you again soon.